They are here to keep you safe, yes, because there are moments when these responses are needed. Of course, absolutely. The key here is to then train ourselves or reteach ourselves, reparent ourselves to then know when it is safe to come back to a calm state. Hey beautiful, welcome to Naturally Empowered Living, your safe space to guiding you on your unapologetic self-awakening journey. This is your weekly sanctuary for waking up from autopilot and transforming the way you approach life through the power of meditation, energetics, and root cause therapy. It is my mission to help you heal unprocessed emotions and release stuck energies by alchemizing your struggle cycles into opportunities for deep self-love, awareness, trust, and connection, to return to your innate essence of being, stepping back into your energy of alignment. Because here, we honor all parts of ourselves, the messy and the magic, the shadows and the light, embodying all parts that make you, you. So if you are ready to get to the root of cultivating real change, get cozy, grab your journal and maybe favorite crystals, and let's discover our power within together. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Naturally Empowered Living podcast. I am so glad that you're here today. As always, just so blessed. And let's just take a moment. Let's just take a moment here to ground, to really settle into this present moment. If it feels right, maybe put a hand on your heart, or just be wherever you are right now. Allow yourself to connect to this present moment here and now. Something as simple as that. Any time of day, if we're ever overwhelmed or stressed or just need to connect back to what is actually going on in life, right? Something as simple as just that quick exercise to connect back to the now. Maybe if it helps to think of your five senses, like one thing you could see, one thing you could smell, one thing you could taste, touch, feel. That is another quick, easy way to just really ground yourself into this present moment. And you could do that anytime, anywhere, no matter what you're doing. Because I know it's very easy to be disconnected, right? And today we are going to be diving into a topic that I know at some point or another has been an impact on our lives, every single one of us. And this is trauma. Now, you might be thinking about trauma as like these big events, right? Either abuse or accidents or these extreme things, maybe an acute trauma that happened once or maybe multiple times, but like these big events. But the truth is, trauma exists on a spectrum. Everyone has experienced trauma within their life in some form or another. And how we understand it can completely change the way or our perception of possibly how we can relate to ourselves or to others and our experiences and perceptions of life. Because I know, at least this was for me, even a short, 5 years ago, like looking at trauma, I always thought it was like that big T trauma, right? Just that it was these big events, these just devastating events that happened that caused trauma. But when we understand that this trauma exists on a spectrum, we can really gain more compassion, more awareness, more understanding, empathy, just seeing things in a different light. So today I want to share just a trauma-informed perspective. Of course, this is my perspective and just the learnings from my certifications. A lot of my certifications and education has come from the Center for Healing and just various other educational platforms. But a lot of my trauma-informed certification comes from the Center for Healing. And of course, that continued education. I'm such a lover of learning. The stamp is the Center for Healing, but I have followed so many mentors for many years, and it all corresponds to the same spectrum, right? So let's share from a trauma-informed perspective why this matters and how we can start noticing and shifting possible survival patterns that show up in our bodies, our minds, right? Maybe that conscious awareness, but we don't know what's still living within our bodies. And let's normalize. Let's start here. Let's actually start with normalizing, because if you were anything like me in thinking that trauma was only like these big haps, right? These big happenings, these catastrophic events, these traumatic events, right? Let's normalize that trauma is a part of being human. Trauma is a part of being human. I'm saying this just with in neutral emotion, right? This isn't to bring a trigger forth. This isn't to shame or blame or woe's me, right? Everyone has it. And once we kind of accept that and bring awareness to it, now we could be like, oh, let's dive into this a little bit. That big T trauma is what I always thought what trauma was, right? That big T, things like abuse, accidents, war, like this big catastrophic traumatizing things. But there's also quote unquote little T trauma. And I don't really like using the big T and little t, but I feel like those are a little more well known, right? But the little T trauma are those subtle everyday experiences, maybe that ongoing cycle, right? Developmental traumas, things that can leave an imprint, like being shamed or possibly being blamed, or just going through those same cycles, maybe in your childhood or upbringing, or just not being emotionally supported or not having needs met, right? So traditionally, mental health approaches often solely focus on the cognitive side of things, like talk therapy or simply just reframing or positive thinking. And as this is all good, there's more depth here. There's more layers to this. Think like this is trimming branches off of a tree. Like you feel really productive at first, like this is getting somewhere, but the branches start to grow back, right? These branches start to grow back because at the root, quote unquote, the root being that underlying trauma, it's still there. The thing is here, trauma lives in the body. It's stored in our fascia, in our muscles, in our organs, in our nervous system. So that's why when we experience things like anxiety or depression or anger or addiction, even when our minds logically are aware, hey, I want to stop this, or why am I feeling this way, or I'm safe, what's going on? Because trauma informed means we look beyond these symptoms and look for the roots of what is actually driving the behaviors. So going back to this example of this tree, right? Think of now a brick wall in front of this tree. So there's a brick wall, and then you see the tree behind a brick wall. And these branches that are coming out above this brick wall is what we see, right? We see the anger, we see the anxiety, we see the addictive behaviors. Possibly we know that we're dissociating, right? We might have that awareness. And the wall, that brick wall, is hiding the roots. It's hiding the trauma, the survival stressor, or the survival instincts, the undigested experiences. So unless we clear that wall, break down that wall, we can't access the roots. And those branches just keep growing back because maybe we're trimming, those branches. We're going to anger management. We're going to talk therapy. We have that awareness, but then what? It's still coming back. So here's a mindset shift, if you're willing to receive it, is trauma is an adaptation. It's not a disorder. We're adapting. Trauma is a survival response. Now you might be thinking wait, what? Maybe did she say that right? And maybe I said that incorrectly on purpose, because trauma, you think of it as possibly the event, right? This event that happened to you is it's the traumatic event. Yes. However, two people may experience the same event, and one may have imprinted a traumatic experience within their body and someone else might not have. So trauma is not necessarily the event. Of course, if there's war or, abuse that happens to people, of course, they probably both will have a traumatic imprint, right? But the thing is here, the experience itself is not what causes the trauma. So when something happens that overwhelms our nervous system adapts to survive. So that might show as hypervigilance or shutting down or emotional withdrawal over time. Adaptation doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means that something has happened and you responded the best way that you could to survive. So really shifting that perspective here. It's not what's wrong with me. We always make sense. And I know that I've shared this episode, or I've shared this on an episode before. I think it was the webinar that I did on shame, episode 141. So I just want to share this episode, or this, oh my gosh, gotta get my words. I want to share this example again, same example that I've shared before, episode 141. If you want a whole breakdown of, I talked about shame and I really broke down that emotion of shame. But imagine a child. You're a child and you raise your hand in class. And maybe you had the wrong answer, or maybe, like you tooted or something happened, right? And now everyone's looking at you and they're laughing at you. And maybe the teacher had their back turned or didn't, show you any sort of support. Like there was no supportive adult to help you process, like, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at me. Everyone's laughing at me. You feel the shame inside, that contraction, that shutdown. Because you didn't have that support in that moment to help, finish that loop, to close that loop, to bring your nervous system back down to that ventral vagal state. So you created a survival adaptation, okay? And over time, if this is repeated, or maybe if you went home and didn't have, that conversation with a caregiver, or didn't have that loop processed or that loop closed, and maybe this is a repeated cycle, these adaptations can compound and create in later life symptoms of anxiety, addiction, depression. So being trauma informed, or just aware, right? I'm not telling you to go get certified and, being trauma informed, but just being aware. It could possibly shift conversations with yourself and others from, what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Is everything okay? Like these simple changes bring compassion and understanding and the possibility for now healing, because you're bringing safety to yourself or possibly others around you. So with yourself, if you want to take this further, start just bringing more awareness. Start noticing your survival adaptations, any coping mechanisms, not saying like that Netflix and chill is a bad thing or having that glass of wine at night is a bad thing, but just start to bring awareness. Am I attaching this to something else? Am I trying to numb by sitting down and scrolling my phone? Awareness is that first step. And try, I know this is very hard, but try to come at this without judgment, solely curiosity, okay? All parts of us make sense. So going back to how trauma can occur is our nervous system then floods with these stress responses, these chemicals, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the fear, even anger or sadness, right? Once these emotions start to get compounded. And ideally, once this threat, quote unquote, is gone or this experience is over, ideally your body should return, that nervous system, I don't want to say should, ideally the body would return to that calm state. You'd come back to that calm ventral vagal state within your nervous system. However, if that stress or that response isn't fully processed, it gets stuck in your system and creating what Peter Levine calls, or noted, a trauma loop. Okay, so these loops then is what may be triggered later and re-trigger that loop to where you're brought back to that same experience. Even not cognitively being aware of it, your body goes back to that same experience. So your heart, might start beating, or you might go into that same, like constriction state, because your autonomic nervous system, it's constantly scanning for danger, looking for, it's looking through a process called neural reception. Okay. So this is that science brain of mine, right? So if this is totally over your head, keep following me. I'll bring in more examples. But if a past trauma isn't resolved, anything resembling it, possibly an authority figure, or, you have the same teacher in the next subject, right? Intimacy partners, just being seen, it can trigger that same fight, flight, or freeze response that you had in said traumatic experience. And then you might feel, like I said, that heart racing, that anxiety, that agitation, that anger, dissociation, all to service you in protection, to survive. Again, adaptation. Your nervous system is here for your survival. So incomplete stress responses possibly can leave trauma imprints active within your body. Even if your mind is saying it's over, it's done with, right? Your body doesn't always know. That's why I love bringing in a mind-body connection, because so often we're stuck in this cognitive piece to where we have to bring the soma, the somatic, the body in. Because repeated triggers can then create these orphaned parts of us. If these things happen so often, or we're not closing that loop, we could possibly then, for a survival adaptation, create an orphaned part, meaning pieces of ourselves now dissociate from ourselves to survive. Maybe now you don't raise your hand in class anymore because you were laughed at. It took one time, but your nervous system wasn't able to calm and process in said event. So now you dissociate. And that orphaned part, maybe that confidence is orphaned, right? And over time, these accumulate, keeping us hypervigilant, constantly scanning for said danger. So to close this scientific standpoint, the neural reception is that nervous system's subconscious process of constantly scanning for cues of safety or danger. And then the amygdala within your brain, it's that key structure that plays a central role in the process, right? By detecting these threats, triggering then that body's survival response. So when the neural reception detects the threat, the amygdala initiates a response, such as the fight, flight, freeze response, and it sends signals to other part of your brain. Now, the incredible piece here, a couple things. First and foremost, our body is magical. Like all of these things, like our autonomic nervous system, it is truly magical. It is so fascinating. And I truly, truly invite you to look at these responses, even your fight, flight, freeze response. Like they are here to keep you safe. Yes, because there are moments when these responses are needed. Of course, absolutely. The key here is to then train ourselves or reteach ourselves, reparent ourselves to then know when it is safe to come back to a calm state. So healing, quote unquote, is possible. It just doesn't always happen solely through the mind. Trauma resolution, breaking these patterns, breaking, these cycles, getting to the root, it happens in the body too. Somatic therapies, energy work, nervous system regulation, it helps complete these stress loops, allowing our energy to then flow more freely through our systems again. That's why I love, simultaneously, I love Reiki and I love root cause therapy, because Reiki really taps into, helping that those energy centers. I really work a lot with chakras, but really igniting our body's innate healing abilities, really opening those energy centers to then allow the body and mind connection to work freely how it is meant to work, to flow freely, opening those healing capabilities, those innate responses. And root cause therapy really helps get to those roots to begin with, right? That's why I do have an approach like root cause therapy. I really love to start with clients first, because we really get to those roots. We release a lot of those trauma responses. We bring safety and calm back to the nervous system, learn how to, come out of those fight, flight, freeze responses by also healing past trauma events that are stuck within our body, right? And then Reiki really helps I call it like that present time, right? Because we're working presently within your body. Yes, it still helps release stagnant energies and things like that, but root cause therapy is really that deeper somatic layer, again, in my opinion. So when the body experiences the safety, it could connect again to the mind, right? We have that open connection again. And these patterns begin to now change. Then with our conscious awareness, we could start to repattern, to rewire, to reparent. Not solely through willpower, but this is where the embodied experience comes in. And that's the beauty of this work. It meets you where you are without judgment and supports your whole system to readapt to safety, to open your body to its innate healing abilities. Your body always wants to heal. sometimes we just have to bring that safety and open those doors for it to feel safe to do so, right? So a small step that you can do right now, that you could take right now, is to start noticing possibly where your body holds tensions, where you find yourself constricting, or when, these triggers are coming up. Simply acknowledging it with awareness. It begins with this process of healing and with practice, with attunement, with resources, possibly with working with a practitioner or a therapist that could help gently then replace these survival strategies with new ways of being that feel more aligned, more safe, more whole, more alive. Because you're rewiring, you're repatterning. So trauma is a part of the human experience. It is. It solely exists on a spectrum. And if trauma is a triggering word, insert your word here. Imprints, limiting beliefs, habit cycles, right? It exists on a spectrum, and every survival adaptation is a reflection of the intelligence and magic of our nervous system, not a weakness, not a disorder, an adaptation. I hope that this episode just helped you see a little bit, like, beyond behaviors, right? Beyond the symptoms that you're seeing, those outbursts, those triggers, that anger, that anxiety in yourself and others. To allow yourself to meet yourself and others with more compassion, more awareness. And if you're on your journey, to start really healing this embodiment from the inside out. And if this episode did resonate with you, or if you want to hear more, like if you want me to dive deeper into different types of traumas, or, acute, developmental, cognitive, collective, like any sort of, or just like, hey, I want to like more educational episodes like this, I would love for you to submit what you want to hear on this show. I'll include a submission form in the show notes of this episode to share your thoughts, your questions, what you want to hear on this show. And also I'll include a link in the show notes of checking out different offerings that I can serve you with, how we can work together, and how I can support your journey to emotional and energetic alignment, really setting those foundations of inner sovereignty and authentic living. I'm sending you so much love. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I freaking love geeking out, like really bringing in like the science and the energetics, and I love it. So thank you for being here. Until next week, as always, simply be you. You have everything inside of you to learn your energy of alignment and be unapologetic in who you are. I'm sending my love and so much light.
Did you find this episode free or empowering? Please read my review. Tickle, boop.
Thank you for spending the sacred time with me on Naturally Empowered Living. If this episode brought you closer to stepping into your energy of alignment, I'd love for you to leave a written review and share how this show has supported your journey. Your feedback truly lights me up and helps others find the space of transformation. And sharing it with someone who might need it spreads the ripple of healing even further. Be sure to check the show notes for ways to connect with me and explore personalized healing sessions and mentorships to deepen your self-awakening journey. Thank you. I appreciate all you are and all you do.